Two books with similar covers, and it's not a coincidence. Let's talk about them. This video is actually going to be about The Road. I want to talk about why The Road is my favorite Cormac McCarthy novel. And yes, I've read Blood Meridian 2 or 3 times, and Suttree, and Child of God, and No Country for Old Men, and so many of his books. But I still think The Road is the best that he's done. To start this video, I actually want to read a little excerpt from the intro to Seamus Heaney's translation, 2001, of Beowulf, which was, sort of widely celebrated as a worthy, updated translation of the Anglo-Saxon classic. Heaney says, "I came to the task of translating Beowulf with a prejudice in favor of forthright delivery. I remembered the voice of the poem as being attractively direct, even though the diction was ornate and the narrative method at times oblique. What I had always loved was a kind of foursquareness about the utterance, a feeling of living inside a constantly indicative mood, in the presence of an understanding that assumes you share an awareness of the perilous nature of life and are yet capable of seeing it steadily and, when necessary, sternly. There is an undiluted quality about the Beowulf poet's sense of the world which gives his lines immense emotional credibility and allows him to make general observations about life which are far too grounded in experience and reticence to be called moralizing." I remember my medieval literature professor in grad school saying something about this translation. So I'm not an expert on Anglo-Saxon language or, early English or any of that stuff, but the impression that my professor gave me was that the reason that this translation was so celebrated is that Heaney picked up on the peculiarly concrete, physical, embodied nature of Anglo-Saxon language. So there's this emphasis on things like stone and rivers and hammers and, things like that, rather than those kind of often abstract Latinate words that end in, ization or something, where you've got like a noun turn or an adjective turned into a noun or something like that. So things like,
"He came upon them, a company of the best, asleep from their feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrow. Suddenly then, the god-cursed brute was creating havoc. Greedy and grim, he grabbed 30 men from their resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed from the raid, blundering back with the butchered corpses."
So it's all physical. It's all just things happening. There's no commentary on it, right? And that's why Beowulf's so interesting and good. I'm not going to do the whole video on Beowulf, but that's what's also so good about The Road. I mean, obviously, I think the first Cormac book I read might have been The Road, but then I immediately went and read everything I could get my hands on. And my favorite was probably actually Suttree. So you can't say that I'm the kind of guy who doesn't like ornate English. I love it. I mean, I'm a big Moby Dick fan, right? Melville's prose is always entangled and the syntax is all crazy and it's overwrought. And I love Victor Hugo and I love Romanticism and all that stuff. But I also like, the perfected narration of Jesus's parables or Old Testament, the story of Jonah or something, where you've got these 4 short, perfect chapters, where it's just couldn't be any more streamlined. It couldn't be pared down any more than what we get. It would be an interesting exercise to try to write such an epic story in such a condensed form. And part of what you get in McCarthy, I think, is that he's in The Road, he has realize it's like he caught a vision and everything he tells in this story is a thing happening in the world, and it just goes boom, 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 and the scenes are unrelenting. There's this whole atmosphere of gray and black and white. I mean, the cover is actually appropriate here, where it's like, all the trees are falling at the beginning. It's post-apocalyptic. It's stripped down to the story of a father and a son, survival, man against nature, man against man, these basic themes. McCarthy doesn't dress them up. He doesn't have to. He knows this. And I think of this as being like the most mature way of writing a story. It's like, I mean, it is to me almost like sacred literature when you get to this level, because what he's done is he's already proved that he can match somebody like Melville in terms of the ornateness of his language. In The Road, he has nothing left to prove. It's like he knows that he's one of the best. And so now what he's going to do is cut all that, just cut until all that's left is the story itself. It's father, it's son, it's survival, it's good guys, bad guys, hunger, despair, doubt, fear, hope. All these things are kind of piled up in this story. I mean, let's listen to the beginning, actually. When he woke in the woods in the dark and the cold of the night, he reached out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Nights dark beyond darkness, and the days more gray each one than what had gone before. Like this sounds like the Beowulf poet almost. It's like these single monosyllabic words kind of piling up and so physical and so clear. Like, it's not like the beginning of Suttree at all, where you can watch my video. I think I read the preface to Suttree out loud. We get this linguistic spareness that describes physical, stark conditions, and it just is the perfect, like, there's, to match the language, to match the sense of the language to the setting. Like, this is, like I say, it's a high art, because you're looking at the scene, you're looking at the things, you're looking at rusted barrels and a push cart and fallen trees and a canvas sack and these kinds of things. And then it'll say, like, the father and the son. Let me just read a little chunk here on this, on like page 2 almost. The segments of road down there among the dead trees. Period. By the way, like, so you do get these sentence fragments piling up. Looking for anything of color. Period. Any movement. Period. Any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face and wiped his nose on the back of his wrist, and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, if he is not the word of God, God never spoke. And you get a line like that, and all of a sudden, like, you just zoom right into this guy's brain, and you realize that there's that contrast between the stark, I guess, here's what I'm thinking is that a lot of us, we have this tendency to think almost of like theology as being this almost like kind of, it's like an indulgence of people who have too much time on their hands. Like, it's formal, it's scholastic, it's almost masturbatory. But what McCarthy shows here is that in a condition where you're scared, you're hungry, you're afraid, you're tired, you're stressed out, you can still be a theologian, so to speak. It just doesn't involve reading Thomas Aquinas. It's like, you just go, God, and that's like what this book continues to conjure through these pages, is the kind of the rawness of high things, that, like, it's not something that has to be, again, like, academic. It can be in the gut and in the heart, and like not mediated by language even. They crossed the river by an old concrete bridge. They stood in the road and studied it. I think we should check it out, the man said. Take a look. The weeds they forded fell to dust about them. See the like simpleness of the language and the lack. There's not these kind of romantic extraneous adjectives to sort of help you understand the scene, because there's this famous what was it? Was it Ezra Pound or maybe William Carlos Williams, I think, in his poem about this, I forget what it's called, but my saxifrage you can just look up William Carlos Williams and saxifrage if you want to find it. It's the poem where he talks about how there should be no ideas but in things. And this became almost like a mantra among modern poets. It was like, we're not going to do the romantic thing anymore. It's like where you're trying to like articulate some idea, but instead the idea is the thing. So when when William Carlos Williams talks about that flower saxifrage, like saxifrage is one of those flowers that grows up through a crack in concrete, in the most stark conditions. And like, he doesn't have to say anything else about it. He just goes, look, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I think that's like the height of literature. It's where the analogy almost stops being an analogy and just becomes the idea itself. Like, there is no further distillation that can happen. I guess some of us have this tendency to think of like philosophy and theology as being higher, like more, I don't know, more big brain or something than literature or poetry. But I think what McCarthy is doing, and what sometimes the really good poets do, is to show that no, like actually sometimes we turn to narration when our prose is sort of overmatched. Like when you can't say something, these claims become ineffable. They become so metaphysical, so high stakes, like ontologically, that we need an image. We need a short story, like a condensed thing to meditate on. And that's the perfect way of telling it. There's no, you can't do a commentary on it. Any commentary on, the parable of the wedding feast is going to be less, it's going to diminish what was originally said. Like that, this is one of those, I guess this is an act of faith for me. I know you could accuse me of like sola scriptura-ism to the max or something, but I do believe there are places in thinking where there's no better way to say it than to give an image, to give an analogy, to tell a brief parable or a short story, or to show rather than tell. And that's what this story does. One of the things that Seamus Heaney says about Beowulf, he describes the narration as being grounded in experience and reticence. Reticence is like a withdrawing kind of aloofness, where it's like it's not in your face, it's slow, it develops as you read it. It only gives you part of the picture. It comes into focus as you're reading it, so that reading itself is this like revelatory, it's getting comfortable with a revelatory state of mind. And I think, these things are hard for me to talk about. I know it sounds a little like I'm dressing it up or something, but as you read The Road, a lot of times there's this like ominous unfolding happening. And I think this is like, in a way, like you've heard the phrase metafiction probably, where like there'll be a book about a guy writing a book, and it's it kind of swallows itself up. But this is what I'm trying to describe is an almost higher form of metafiction, where it's like the acts of the narration are kind of the movements of I'm almost having to use like language for talking about classical music or something, because that's what I'm talking about, where like the tone of one scene shifts into the tone of another scene, and that movement psychologically, emotionally even, is an artful choice by the author. Like he's thinking on that level. So there are words, and there's specific and like particular images, but there's also like the tone of that as it moves from one scene to the next. And man, that is another level, you know. McCarthy also understands the idea of, I think it was Aristotle in the Poetics talking about the way that horror that happens off stage. Aristotle's example is the place where Oedipus gouges his eyes out off stage, because to show it would be a little, I don't know, like much. But if you just have him off stage and all you hear is the scream, like that'll really send a chill up your spine. And McCarthy does similar things throughout this book. There's you know, he'll sort of he'll give you a feel for what's down there, like, you know, the scene where there's the half-eaten, still living people that are being held hostage in the basement. They're being like kept alive so that the meat stays fresh, like, so these pirate people are eating them. But he doesn't show it to you in, or like, unnecessary detail. Instead, he sort of just gives you enough to know what's down there, and then your imagination like fills in the picture. Like, you can understand. The same goes for the whole, like, what is the setting here? Is it, I mean, was there a nuclear bomb? Did an asteroid hit? Did a, you know, mega? We don't know. Like, we don't know why it's like this, and he never really answers that question. And I mean, I also just love like I said, the theme of the father and the son. I guess especially since I'm a father and have a son, have 3 children, and I feel like there are these. I mean, you can just tell that McCarthy's a dad and that he has thought about this. I guess the story was that he had a pretty young son at the time he wrote this, about the age of the son here, and he had this like kind of vision of a ruined world and trying to, you know, I mean, what do you want to do as a parent? You want to give your child the best opportunity possible. And so how do you do that in a completely broken world? And so there are just these like scenes sprinkled all the way through this book that are so raw. You know, it's so like I don't know, it cuts right to the heart of what it's like to care. I heard one time somebody describe having a child as like pulling your heart out of your chest and letting it walk around in the world. Like, that's how it feels. It's so vulnerable, but also so great of a thing, you know what I mean? Like, and you give anything, right? So you can sense that he doesn't it's not like in a romantic book, it would be like, you know, the dad would, like, I don't know, write a letter or say something to the son, and it would be this like gushing emotional thing. But here it's just, he just get, like, when they discover a Coca-Cola, for example, in this, you know, wasteland, the child has never seen anything like it. He doesn't even know what it is. What is a soda? What, you know, what? And so the dad finally cracks it open and gives it to him. And it's like this moment of just such relief. Or like, you know what I mean? Like, just like these moments of solace sprinkled in the horror, the suffering, are just so like, they just become so poignant, I guess. He says, you know, and then you get these internal monologues. He's talking to the son one time, and he says, "You wanted to know what the bad guys looked like. Now you know. It may happen again. My job is to take care of you. I was appointed to do that by God. I will kill anyone who touches you. Do you understand?" And the son says, "Yes." He sat there cowled in the blanket. After a while, he looked up. That is, the son looked up. "Are we still the good guys?" he said. "Yes, we're still the good guys." And like, again, the stripped down, streamlined, like the way the childlike, like the idea that it matters whether we're, you know what I mean? Like, you can picture this. These guys are starving. Somebody has just tried to, I don't know, like kidnap the boy to eat him or something. Like, it's terrible. It's horror, you know. And the son's touching need to establish good guy and bad guy. This is such a human thing. And the shortness of the conversation, the way that the dad doesn't even explain it. "I will kill anyone who tries to touch you. Are we still the good guys then?" "Yes. Yes, son." Like, that's sometimes there are things you just feel like you can't explain to your son. They're too complicated. They're too difficult. And so you just give them you just say this, do this. Darkness coming fast, darkness and cold. Nothing. Wood smoke on the damp air. There's also obviously there's a callback to like American naturalism in this story that I like. The idea of like an indifferent nature, a silent God, this feeling of being alone in the universe, which like, I mean, almost no matter how much faith you have, you will probably experience from time to time. And I think McCarthy does honor to writers like Frank Norris or Stephen Crane or any who tried to conceive of that hostile, indifferently hostile universe. They keep a gun with them with 2 bullets. I mean, I guess this just dials up the complete despair of the situation. Finally, the dad has to say to the boy, because they're being like hunted, you know, the dad says, if they find you, you're going to have to do it. Do you understand? Shh, no crying. Do you hear me? You know how to do it. You put it in your mouth and point it up. Do it quick and hard. This is the dad explaining to his son that if they're about to capture us, just blow your brains out, because you won't that'll be better than what they're going to do. And I mean, to me, that's like, that's the kind of thing you just, I don't don't even know how McCarthy dreamed that up, because how could you, tell a 10-year-old boy that? It's too scary. I feel like there would be this tendency to lie or to try to protect. And maybe that's part of what I love about this book too, is that I feel like we've coddled people. And I'm not saying this in like a tough guy way, but I mean, it is true that we live in a sheltered, happy time in history, but that could change. And I sometimes think that, I guess I'm thinking of my own childhood. Like, no, I didn't understand that when I was a kid. Like, I thought we had just defeated the difficult past and now the good times were here to stay, and I wouldn't have to be tough like that, But it may be that scary, rough side of human nature is only temporarily repressed, and that to survive, we'll have to rediscover it sometimes. It seems like that's part of the, one of the phrases that he uses in this book, I think sort of famously, is the idea of carrying the fire. He doesn't clarify it much, but it means being one of the good guys. And like, even in the most unbelievably harsh condition, even when you have to kill in self-defense or contemplate things like suicide or whatever, you still you understand that we aren't animals, and you try to behave in a way that ennobles and that God would approve of. And they retain that vision all the way to the end of the book. The idea is, and the boy understands it, even though the father they don't carry a Bible with them. The churches are all gone. There's no mention of anything like that. But there's this idea of carrying the fire, which is that we carry the fire. I don't know about those guys who are eating babies out there in the woods. I don't know. That's between them and God. But listen, son, we carry the fire. I'm not going to give you a list of rules about what that means. You just know what it means. Do it, And anyway, like I said, this book, I love my McCarthy. I think Child of God is quite underrated, and probably in a similar way to this one. Suttree, awesome. Blood Meridian, obviously awesome. Like, I'm not against Blood Meridian. I'm just saying that Blood Meridian may have been a sort of, indulgently experimental language game, whereas I think The Road is an imagistic vision that is closer to something like prophecy than something that's as studied and crafted as Blood Meridian or Suttree. Okay, that's all. Thanks for listening. Bye.